Senator Carter.
Mr. Chairman and members, thank you very much for your indulgence this morning. I've got an amendment for Senate Bill 76, I think that's been passed out, that takes into consideration recommendations from Louisiana State Police and UMC and the medical community. If
Yes, okay, I'll offer the amendments. That's going to be 568. I'm going to ask staff, before I do that, members, staff, if you could pass a co-author sheet for the previous bill, Senate Bill 3. Senator Long has requested that. And I'm going to ask staff to read in the amendments and explain the amendments quickly.
What these amendments do is change the statute to say that from a child under the age of 13 to a child under the age of 18 has to be in a approved child restraint system or the motor vehicle restraint system based on age. And what it does is say that if you're under 2 years old, you have to be in a rear-facing seat. If you're if you're 2 years of age or older, you have to be in a front-facing seat. And if you're 4 years old and you've outgrown at least 4 years old and you've outgrown the front-facing seat, you have to be in a child booster seat that's in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. And if you're under 9, you have to be either in an adult seat belt that fits you properly with your positioning correctly. If you're under 13, you have to be in you have to be restrained in an adult seat belt, or if you still fit in the others, I guess you can be in that, but you have to be in the back seat unless there's no back seat in your vehicle. And whichever category fits you the best based on your age and size is where you have to be. These were submitted by the Medical Society in an effort to improve, or I guess to help with injuries in an accident where a child is involved.
those recommendations also, Mr. Chairman, are ones that came from the Medical Society that brings them in concert with the national standards.
Okay. Do you have any comments on
Well,
on the amendment?
on the amendment.
On the amendment. Do y'all have any comments on the amendment? Okay. Senator Smith, is your questions on the amendment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Carter, just some help with, so it's pretty extensive amendments for what was a pretty simple bill.
Yeah, that's kind
originally.
of how I felt too. We initially started out just wanting to increase the age because we recognize that the leading cause of death in youth are due to automobile accidents where kids are not properly restrained. Our bill started out with just increasing the year and weight. But after speaking with state police and the medical societies, they shared with additional best practices that would enhance and do a more comprehensive review of how we can prevent fatalities and in the case of accidents where children are not properly restrained. At the table with me, I have Trooper Brian Lee, who's here for information purposes only, and will answer any questions that you have. We also have Bridget Gardner with UMC, United Medical Center, who can answer most of the questions relative to the amendments and the things. So if you would direct your questions, or we can
Sure.
address.
So what technical question first is, so with your amendments, because I'm putting them all together here, we're getting rid of on page 2 the weight requirement for a child who is 2 years of age, or let's see, a child, when we had the weight requirement of 60 pounds, that they had to be 60 pounds or less. If they were 60 pounds or less, they had to be in a forward-facing child safety seat. So that's changing with all these extensive regulations, right?
Correct.
Because that's pretty heavy for an actual child seat. But we're getting rid of that, so that's not in this big set of amendments. I don't see that. Is that? Any one of you?
I can speak on behalf of that.
Yeah,
yes, what we are doing is keeping children 4 years of age or older in a full internal harness. So I agree with you that the amendments are very extensive, but that's because our current law has been outdated for several years, and this brings us up to best practice. So our current law actually puts children at high risk of injury or fatality. So what we're doing is putting our law in Louisiana up to best practice according to American Academy of Pediatrics and NHTSA, and actually protecting children. So to answer your question, it keeps children 4 years old or older in an internal harness until 9 years old, when then they can possibly fit into a vehicle seat.
So from 4 years old to 9 years old, they have to be not just in a seatbelt with a booster seat. They have to be actually in a internal harness seat, so like a
Provided
car seat.
provided their size, if they're the appropriate size where they can fit in a regular car seat, then it wouldn't be applicable. So this would be a very small child. So we're looking based on size.
Well, that's what I'm asking. If you can, I'm sorry. What was your name again, Miss
Bridget Gardner, I'm sorry.
Gardner?
4 years old or has outgrown his harness in the internal harness can be placed in a belt positioning booster seat.
Okay.
Yes,
So anything under 4 in the full harness.
in the full harness.
Over 4, if they've outgrown that full harness, they can be in a booster with proper positioning.
lap
of
shoulder
the
seat belt, yes,
lap
sir.
shoulder. Okay. And we jump down here on
And
your.
those are extreme cases, obviously, Senator. That's when a kid is very small. So if a kid is obviously larger frame, you wouldn't expect a 9-year-old to be sitting.
Well, that's
in
what
a
I'm trying to
booster.
think in some practical terms of, having children. I mean,
And some
watching
of
them
it's-
grow out of these things, they
And when they
you know,
grow
it's hard-
out, so
it's
some
hard
of
to-
it's very visual. So
hard to
another-
squeeze some of those kids into those little seats. They're pretty uncomfortable for them as
Sure,
as
they
well,
wouldn't like
you know.
that. So when their size, the evident part of that is a kid can't fit, then obviously they're eligible to be in a regular seat. A part of this is also from a practical standpoint. Then I'll let Bridget continue to answer your specific questions. But another part of why this is significant is it becomes an enforcement issue, so state police can readily see. A part of what the antiquated laws have been is based on manufacturer standards. Well, who knows what manufactured standards are? So even state police is difficult for them to enforce the law based on, a little tag that is obscure under the seat. And so that child may or may not be properly restrained. State police and other law enforcement agents can readily see if this child, based on their size, should be restrained differently. And we believe that according to best practices across the country, that if Louisiana's antiquated laws are brought up to speed, it can be a significant savings of life and severe damage.
And I appreciate that, and we all certainly want that. We just also want it to be practical. That's so our citizens can follow the law and not be inadvertently and unknowingly breaking the law.
The visual impact of the amendments that you see gives the law enforcement agent an opportunity to view it visually and not have to pull out a piece of paper and measure and do all those kind of things. But
Okay.
I'll let
Let's
you
go.
continue questions.
We're go. On the back, on page 2, down 19 through 24, provision 5, we're talking about some of the older kids now. Saying a child who is younger than 13 years of age shall be in the rear seat when available. What's the current law right now? When can a child move from the rear seat to the front seat?
Currently, the law now states that once that child is no longer required to be in a booster seat, they can sit anywhere inside of that vehicle.
Okay. All right. And so now we're going to move it. We're going to make a definitive line that they have to be 13 or older. Or actually, it's younger than 13 years of age. So once they reach 13, they can sit in the front seat. I'm just wondering how practical that is. I mean, you have some 12-year-olds that are 160 pounds.
That wouldn't be applicable.
How is that not? We don't have a weight restriction on these older children right here. It's strictly an age.
So the age of 13 is strictly because of airbag deployment in the front seat. So
Okay.
the head and spinal cord cannot withstand the forces of an airbag until they reach approximately 13 years old, in which the ossification or the hardening of the bones can support the head and neck with those types of forces. So regardless of the weight of the child, until they reach a certain age, they do not have hardening of the bones with that kind of airbag deployment. That's the reason for the age 13. Currently, it's not in our current law.
Okay, well, that's the reason, so, all right. All right, thank you.
Senator Fannin, this is on the amendment?
Yeah, and part of it's on the bill, but part of it is on the amendment. And I didn't have a question until you began to talk about 9-year-olds and how we restrain them. I just happen to have a couple of 9-year-old granddaughter and a grandson, and I know that being restrained in a seat and them having to drive 8 hours to come see me is a difficult, very difficult situation. And it's a terrible thing that we have to make it so restrictive under their safety that they don't want to travel to grandma's house or grandpa's house because they don't want to have to ride under those conditions. So here's my concern about the bill. When I hear of all the accidents that happen about children being restrained, it seems to be more about people that don't have their seats hooked up correctly, and they don't have them correctly restrained under current law. Not that we've outdated law, we just not have been able to teach people to hook them up correctly and restrain them correctly under the current law. So I want to do what's best for children and those small children, absolutely. At some point, I think parents have a responsibility to know what's best for their children, and we need to keep government out of it. And for my 9-year-old grandkids and my granddaughters, whoever it may be, for anybody's, I don't want them not being willing to travel anywhere simply because they have to fight all those restraints. Now, if I'm going across town and I live in New Orleans, Senator, and you go across the block to see them, that you may have an issue there. I have a totally another issue with mine because I'm telling you, every time they come, and I just happen to have one that has to drive about 7 hours, and every time they come, they're aggravated because they've had to ride in those seats for 8 hours.
So
Now, yeah, because when you get look, that was fine when they were a little bitty. Look, they droop their head over and go to sleep. They slept the whole time. But I tell you, 9-year-old boys don't sleep, for an 8-hour trip. And I would think very few 9-year-old girls sleep for an 8-hour trip.
Can I read Section 5 for you, sir?
Yeah.
A child who is younger than 13 years of age shall be transported in the rear seat of a motor vehicle when available, in a properly used child restraint system, belt positioning, child booster seat, or adult safety belt that complies with all applicable federal law. So your grandchild would only have to sit in the back seat, not front seat, with a seat belt on because of the issue with the airbag deployment. They wouldn't have to sit in a booster if they're 13 and they were
Well, you said
appropriate
13.
size.
I said 9. You now.
Okay, I'm sorry. So when
I mean,
you go-
13's pretty old and pretty good size for the most of them in today's society.
So when you go to a child who is at least 9 years of age, has outgrown the height or weight limits of a child restraint system or best positioning, they also it would be similarly set.
So do you feel comfortable that every parent out there that's going to have a child is going to know what you just read, how to comply with the law?
Well, part of this, obviously,
Yeah.
we have antiquated laws that people don't know now. So
yeah.
a part of any safety measure requires education. And so part of that, between state police and the medical societies, a part of that would be educating people. State police is also offered that in cases where people are not certain how to restrain, you can go to any of the Louisiana State Troopers
They will.
stations, and they will show you. And if you don't have proper restraint, they will give you one.
And they do training up in our area, I mean, annually for it. It's not always convenient. People always don't do it,
Yeah, and safety, unfortunately, is not always convenient. So, I mean, I get your point totally, and I totally respect it. It's one of those things that when we talk about saving lives and we talk about creating.
So I didn't hear any statistics. Tell me about the statistics from where we at now. I mean, a couple of questions, and this was for the bill, but we'll go ahead and do it since the amendment will be changing the bill. Tell me what that everyday mom and dad is going to have to do cost-wise and from what they're doing today. I mean, is it going to be a more expensive seat? Is it going to be the same seat and they just have to abide by different weights and heights and regulations, and we're going to leave that up to the state police to determine whether they fit that or not? That's pretty objective there in itself, but it's pretty loose, in what the everyday mom and dad that gets up every day struggling to get their kid to school and to get to get to work. How's it going to change from where we're at today?
So right now we are running 105 child passenger safety fitting stations throughout the state of Louisiana free of cost. They're located in every region of the state where constituents can come and get free education and installation by a team of over 700 certified technicians throughout the state, medical, law enforcement, first responders. So there is availability to teach people. We do approximately 7,000 seats per year instructing people. Statistics, and I would like to refer to the situation that you presented to me with your 9-year-old grandchildren, and that is that we're going to keep children in the rear-facing mode longer because it cradles the head and spinal cord, and your 9-year-old grandchildren would be in a booster seat. Now, being in a trauma center, witnessing this every day, the problem with not being in a booster seat until they accurately fit on the vehicle seatbelt is that the lap belt, it doesn't have to take a severe crash. It could be you braking very hard. That lap belt compresses onto the abdomen without a seatbelt. So you're talking about kidney, liver, intestines rupturing. And so time after time, we've seen children come through the trauma center knowing that if they were in the more protective category, those injuries would absolutely not exist in these children. So when you look at what does it change today versus tomorrow, seats for several years since the national standards were upgraded have housed children rear-facing much longer, like our law is amended to do. So the manufacturers have the seats out there. They've been out there for several years, as well as the internal harnesses now can go up to 120 pounds. So the seats and the manufacturers have met the need of the national standards. The only thing that I would see is that we're putting children in booster seats longer until they accurately fit on a vehicle safety seat. So we're keeping children in boosters longer. So the number one thing that children are going to do, the most dangerous thing, is to get into a vehicle. And so if we can properly place the shoulder belt and the lap belt on those children with a backless booster seat that could be as inexpensive as $25, we've just cut out all of the pain and suffering and all of the medical injuries and fatalities with that child by simply boosting them up to where the lap shoulder belt fits like it fits you and I. So when we're teaching for the last, I'd say 5 years, we cannot teach Louisiana law. We have to teach best practice because Louisiana law puts us at risk, puts children at risk. So parents turn to this law for best practice and guidance. Are we seeing people out in the communities rear-facing till 3 and 4 years old? We are. It's because we've been educating on this for quite some time. Now we're catching our law up to national standards and putting us with the other 11 states that have upgraded laws.
Is that it, Senator Fannin? Okay. Senator Long, I know you had asked for a personal privilege as well.
I do, and it's amazing sometimes how things work out. My son and my 2 grandsons are here today, and if there's ever been a prototype of what this bill reflects, it would be that. But give me a grandfather and a father's privilege, if you would. My son Richard is a professor at Baton Rouge Community College. And two of my 9 joys as grandfather to grandsons and one grandfather to a granddaughter. But I have Nasby. Nasby, you want to stand up? And I have Jude. So these are the real guys that we're talking about here. And Mr. Chairman, if I might, with the permission of your leadership, my son Richard would like to address this issue because he deals with it every day as a parent. So, Richard, you'll need to fill out a card, but we'd like for you to come and address this because as a parent, I think we need to hear from parents because I think Senator Fannin makes some exceptional good points, but we need to hear what you do as a parent to provide security for your children when they're riding.
Well, the first thing I would say.
Just state your name,
I'm
just
sorry,
for the record.
Richard Long.
Thank you.
The first thing I would say, as I was listening to Senator Fannin, is let's talk about the high end of the 13-year-old. Why a 13-year-old in the front seat? My son Nasby, who's in the red shirt, will turn 12 this fall. Right, he's 11 now. So a parent, and he does not sit in the front seat. He sits actually in the far back. I drive a small SUV, and so he sits in the third row. But that's and he's about an average 11, 12-year-old. So that's what we're talking about when they're saying not in the front seat. As she said, the bones are not ready. And so when you think about size, and I totally agree, I would never put those boys in a harness as you're thinking of. But they both sit on booster seats, right? They're very easily acquired. A lot of times you can even buy a car seat that kind of, when they first begin sitting in it, it's not just a plain booster, it has a back to it because they can't sit that far back and be kind of buckled in. So it's kind of convertible, meaning you can go from a little bit more restrictive to less restrictive as you move along. So both of them sit in a booster seat that you can take in and out of a car just very easily move. So it can be attached to the seat, but a lot of times it doesn't have to be. So it's not a burden on the parents in that way. And so that's when we say a booster seat at I forgot the age you said. The booster was starting at
Up until 9 years of age is what the amendment.
Right.
until 9.
Until it fits you.
So
Right.
Jude
Or until you
is
grow out of it.
10,
Jude is 10 and Nasby is
will be 12.
I'm sorry, Jude is 8. I'm sorry, Jude is 8
9.
and Nasby's
Okay.
and Nasby's 12.
Too
And
many
they both sit in
grandboys.
boosters, right? Because when they don't sit in boosters, they sit where the seatbelt kind of comes almost across the neck and not across the chest. So they need just that few inches to sort of sit up high enough where the belt hits them in the right way. So those distinctions, I know there's a lot of confusion about when the child is this age or, at this pound, this weight. And so it can be, so I want you to see on the higher end, right? That's what we're talking about. And so my daughter, who is 4 and will be 5, and she's on the tall side for 4, she still sits in a 4-point harness, meaning across the chest and then a 2 buckles that fit between her legs. So, and she can do that on her own. Obviously, when she does it, I make sure it clicks every time. But so it's not, these laws, as she said, are very much being practiced by parents across the state. So it's not, I don't think it would be changing a good number of what the practices are. I think it would allow the law enforcement to more readily see not only those who are in the front seat, but also those who need a little bit more support.
Thank you.
I
Thank you,
hope
Richard.
that was clear enough. I know as I was listening, I was like, I understand kind of what's going on, but I know from the point of view of like sometimes it's just a lot of words and it's like, I'm not sure what's happening here. And I totally agree with you, Senator Fannin. As a parent, I would not want to like travel long distances with my children. They don't want to, they don't want to be in those car seats anymore. And there's only so many devices and movies. And
Well, I
things
can tell you about these two. They'd much rather be playing baseball than sitting.
Anyway.
than sitting. But thank you, Richard.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, boys, if you want to agree with your father, you fill out a green card. If you want to counter what he said, you're going to have to fill out the red card if you disagree with him. But remember, he could probably still punish you. So go with the green cards. Okay, Senator Hewitt for question on the amendments.
Can we keep Richard around with us? He was really good, man. I was like a senator in the making.
He's a good backup. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I like the amendments. I think it's best practices. It is all about what's safe for the children. And to me, what it does is it establishes a framework to guide parents with enough wiggle room where it says when your child has outgrown this step, you go to the next step. And so I think it gives you as a parent enough flexibility with the ultimate goal of making sure that your child is restrained appropriately for their size. And so, and then gives law enforcement the opportunity to enforce it. There's lots of opportunities to train parents on the right procedures. And so I think it's right on point. And so I appreciate you bringing it. I think it's a really great step. It is about keeping kids safe. And some parents, like the parent that just testified, they're all on it. He's an expert already. Some parents need a little bit more guidance. And so I think this is right on point and at the right time, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move favorable on the amendment.
Okay, and that now is the
sounded
right,
yet.
now is the right time. So Senator Hewitt moves that we adopt Amendment 568. Is there any objection to the adoption of the amendment? Seeing no objection, that amendment is adopted. I want to read the cards, and we have Bridget Gardner at the table, present and in favor of the bill. We have Patty Cleese, is it with UMC, that is present and will provide information. We have Michael Toops from UMC, present and will provide information. And we have Sergeant Brian Lee, present and provide information at the table. Okay, is there anybody here to speak for or against that we've not heard from? I believe that the board is now clear. Senator Carter, you have a right to close on your bill.
I want to thank you all for your indulgence, and certainly thank Richard for that very timely, and Senator Long for that very timely real-life demonstration of what this means. And I think now we have, with his additional testimony, gives us yet another real-life practical view of what this means. So when you've got a smaller child who's sitting in a seat and they're not properly restrained and it's going here, you can see why that could potentially cause more harm in the case of an accident. When that car jerks and that belt tightens, it's at their neck. So you see the additional harm that's being caused. While I see and understand on its face it appears to be onerous, as you delve into it, as Senator Hewitt so adequately presented, it's a lot more simpler when you realize there are just steps of options that you should take. Richard also mentioned something that's critically important. When you first purchase a restraint, there usually is an attached booster seat that as your kid grows, you don't have to buy another one. You take that booster seat and then you place it. That's no longer needed when the kid is at the appropriate height. And the amendments speak to more extreme cases where children are smaller. And if that child is still smaller and that belt is facing at their neck, then you see the potential danger that's there. Obviously, one, they're not properly restrained in case of an accident, but two, they're further put in damage because that bag could potentially strangle them. The airbag, as was noted, could damage their spine. So I think that taking advantage of the great work that UMC and others are doing, and Louisiana State Troopers are doing, and educating and providing resources for parents, grandparents, and others will go a long way to providing greater safety for families and young people. So with that, unless you have anything else to add, or if you have any other questions, I would ask your favorable passage as amended.
Okay, Ms. Gardner, thank you for reaching out. I know that you saw the bill filed and reached out to both Senator Carter and myself, and this is how government's supposed to work. When people listen to constituents and listen to the experts in the field, we can come up with some good policy here. So, Senator Smith.
As we're going through some of these height and weight restrictions, I see Mr. Nickel in the audience. I want to make sure he's still going to be able to drive to the Capitol. Is he going to be all right with that?
I didn't see that one coming.
I think Senator Carter has put in their height or weight, so I think he's qualified to drive based
Senator
on one
Smith,
or the
I think
other.
he's going to make you pay for that comment later.
Okay, Senator Fannin.
Just one final comment. I do hope that with state police, I don't know whether here or not. Okay, yeah, we are. That this would be a case where at least on the first offense, it would be a compassion type warning, to parents about making sure they understand and how it's done right, not an overreach as a possibility. So
No, sir.
Hope
This
you'll
is-
consider that,
This is a secondary violation, so it's not something that we will be stopping parents for unless you just have a child that's jumping around in the back seat. It has to be something that takes place first, but it puts it in line with the education that we're already providing.
Okay, thank you.
And we've also, to that point, asked them to, because this is about safety and not about, I think Senator Mizell mentioned earlier that citizens should not become a revenue stream, and we feel the same way. So we've had extensive conversations that this is more about a warning and correction and not about citation.
Okay. Senator Fannin, okay, thank you. Senator Hewitt moves that we report Senate Bill 76 with amendments. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, hearing no objection, that will be reported favorably with amendments.
Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman and
Senator.
members, thank you very much, and thank you all very much, obviously.
Thank you.